morning to you both.
Good morning.
There's a whole load of noise about this vote this evening. I'm with you, Andrew. I think that all of this noise and hot air, actually, it's like the troops being marched up to the top of the hill, and then they'll all bottle it when it comes to it. All those 60 who voted for the amendment last night, how many of those will actually vote against this evening? I suspect it'll be less than double figures. It'll be just a handful. Yeah. And it'll be very interesting to see people like Lee Anderson, Brendan Clark-Smith. I mean, Lee said, and he's a man of principle, he said that he finds it hard to vote for something he doesn't believe in. Will he vote for it tonight, or will he actually abstain? I mean, in a sense, he should vote against it, but I don't think they will, because the last thing they want to do is trigger an early general election, because they know they're going to get, quite rightly, ousted.
Well, I wrote about this in the Mail today. One of the things the whips were saying, if you vote against it, mate, there's a general election very soon. They'd rather have another 9 months of getting paid. 9 months.
But the thing about all of this is the whole thing is a complete dead cat red herring, because even if it does all go through, then the reality is it's not a deterrent. We know it's not a deterrent because only a few hundred would go there, and already this year, in freezing cold weather, hundreds of illegal migrants have made that dangerous trip. Tragically, 5 people have already lost their lives this year. It proves, in horrific tragedy, it's not a deterrent. They should just give it up. This whole thing, this will only stop when someone who is leading this country has the courage and the guts and the spine to say, we're picking up and we're taking back to France. That is the only thing that will stop it.
Who are you suggesting? You think it might be you?
Well, I'll tell you what, no one else at the moment is saying this. We're entitled to do it under international treaties. I've read them, I know the clauses, but the leaders of the Tories and the Labour Party, they're utterly spineless on this. We know it works because it worked in Australia.
It would very much sour the champagne in Davos this week, that kind of talk.
Oh, I know. I turned down an invitation, you'll be pleased to know.
Quite right. Quite right. Now, stay with us, because we're going to talk now to Richard Graham, who's the Tory MP for Gloucester. Now, he's part of the... there's so many groups. Which lot are you, Richard? Remind us. You're the One Nation Conservatives, as opposed to the right-wing Tories. So your position today...
I'm a Conservative MP, full stop.
OK, fine.
We're all Conservative MPs. Don't try and divide us.
OK, but we've got... Doing
a pretty good job of that yourselves.
We've got the former Lord Chancellor, Robert...
Buckland.
Thank you very much. He's tabling an amendment today. Are you going to support that?
No, I'm supporting the government, full stop, and that's what all Conservative MPs should be doing. We need to get this bill through so that we can get some people back to Rwanda, the deterrent in place, and move on.
What about Richard Tice's point? It isn't going to work. It's only going to be a few hundred people at best. It will be bedeviled by appeals from human rights lawyers, and the government is not willing to stop that happening. They had a chance. They could have accepted the amendment yesterday, and they didn't.
So, I mean, Richard Tice is in the same position as the Labour Party. They both say it won't work, and let's prove them wrong.
Richard, our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, has been down to Calais and he's interviewed people waiting there to jump on these boats. And apparently the idea of Rwanda being a deterrent is a source of great comedy to people who are down there waiting to get across here for all sorts of reasons. They believe that they can just use an excuse when they arrive here to not get on that aeroplane, be it whatever. Their mental health, their mental well-being is one of the reasons they could cite. They get a letter from the GP to say this person isn't fit to fly. They're going to be so distressed they'll take their own life, etc. The bar is so low on the appeals process that even the asylum seekers themselves, the refugees, the economic migrants, whatever you want to call them, they think it's a joke. Do you have any evidence that it will be a deterrent?
Well, look at the Migration Watch report. That is crucial. They made it very clear that they thought this would be a powerful deterrent. And frankly, if it wasn't going to be a deterrent, then what's all the fuss about? Because from Labour's point of view, if everybody comes here and they'll all be able to get through with legal help their various, largely made-up excuses, then they wouldn't be worried about this at all. So I think that, frankly, there's a lot of wild speculation from people with political agendas of their own, whether it's Labour, Reform or anybody else. This will have a considerable impact. We should get on and do it. Every Conservative MP wants to see it happen, so let's do it. And by the way, it will happen. I'm confident of that.
I think I agree with it. But what about Richard Tice's point, Richard, that it's quite simple. If they were in power, if he was Prime Minister, he would order the boats to be turned back. That's what happened in Australia. He says he's read the international treaties. We can do it. We've got the laws now. Is he right? And if he is right, why don't we do it?
No, he's completely wrong, of course, and the situation in Australia is completely different. It's a very different sea. It's not a major traffic point for huge international shipping. He's no better, to be honest, than several of my constituents in a pub who think they can solve everything, including inflation, Gaza, the Red Sea, you name it, over a couple of pints. It's not real politics at all. And by the way, the whole business about individual human rights is incredibly important to a whole number of things. We share intelligence with our allies on the basis of absolutely identical approaches to individual human rights and how that intelligence is required. If we're going to abandon international law for every individual just like that through one of these amendments, the consequences are much bigger than many people understand.
Can we bring Richard Tice? Richard, I want your reaction to that, because that's quite a scathing criticism. Your opinion is no better than a bloke in the pub.
Of course, Richard's entitled to his view, but the reality is America's not a member of the ECHR, nor is Canada, nor is Australia. They practice human rights. We invented human rights. We don't need some overseas foreign political judges telling us what to do. I've read the treaties, Richard. I know the exact clauses under which proper leadership would pick these people up safely out of the boats, take them back to France, and this would stop the business model within a couple of weeks. Your lot, you just haven't got the guts and the spine to do it.
Richard, respond.
It's fantastic. He loves a bit of rhetoric. He can rant with the best of them, put himself up as a candidate to oppose me in Gloucester, and let's see what happens.
But he's got a constituency in Hartlepool, and I think he's rather confident up there.
But also, Richard, I find that really interesting because
he hasn't got a constituency at all. He's a candidate.
But Richard, Richard Graham, you heard Richard Tice talk about the law, and you came back with a personal attack. Well, talk about the law. Why is he wrong in terms of the clauses in that legislation?
Listen, we've got all sorts of commitments in domestic law, in the ECHR law, and remember the ECHR was something that we created, Churchill created it, and in international law as well. We are at the moment using missiles against the Houthis in North Yemen, who have launched drone and missile attacks on international shipping trying to go through the Gulf of Aden. And our argument is that it is our responsibility with allies to make sure that the freedom of the seas, that international law, is absolutely maintained. You cannot, at the one hand, invoke international law when it suits you and totally disregard it when it doesn't suit you.
I'm sorry.
And by the way, this is something for Richard Tice to consider. Imagine a woman seriously ill with a difficult pregnancy being put on a flight to Rwanda and dying halfway on that journey. Imagine what the impact on the British public of that would be.
Hey, listen, I'm not in favour of the Rwanda policy, but your responsibility as a government is to protect and defend British citizen first and foremost, and you are failing in that responsibility. You bang on about international law, and it's ridiculous when you're not defending British citizens.
I think that's an extraordinary sort of insult. Tell me which British citizen in Gloucester I have never defended, protected and stood up for.
But what we're hearing, Richard Graham...
I've got to come back. I'm sorry. Richard, people are coming across on those boats. Some of them are committing crimes. They are committing violent acts, rape, torture, drug dealing and, tragically, murder. That's about defending British citizens and protecting us, and you are failing.
And some of those who are coming over are people who've come from utterly dire situations in Syria and Afghanistan. Some of them were even working with Britain and our allies in Afghanistan. And therefore, there has to be a sensible process for deciding who can stay and who has to go back.
So they're more important than British citizens, are they?
No, don't be absurd. Obviously, the Rwanda option gives us a way of processing asylum claims in a third country, which several other countries in Europe are looking at. It's a policy that will almost certainly go forward, and you should accept that most people in this country actually want to see the whole asylum process include the Rwanda option, and that's what we will pass this evening.
Richard Graham, just very briefly, you talk about international treaties, but every single one of those asylum seekers, or economic refugees, as I would call them, many of them, who are crossing the channel, they're breaking the law when they set foot on British soil. They're breaking the law. The point Richard Tice is making, turn them back because they're breaking the law.
Listen, who is going to put a small boat, which is almost certainly going to be in danger in the weather for about half the year, back onto the sea with the possibility of those people dying in it? It's not what the Royal Navy is going to do under any government.
And it's not what I'm suggesting, Richard. It's listen to what I'm saying. You pick up out of the boats, you put them in the border force cutters, and you take them back to Dunkirk and Calais.
I honestly not really here to be ranted at by another politician who's hoping to get elected.
Well, we appreciate your time, Richard Graham, this morning. You are an extremely popular local constituent MP, and I think you do a brilliant job in your area of Gloucester. But I like to see the debate, and that, frankly, is the kind of debate that we have not seen enough of.
And we should. And just be clarify, Richard Tice, how you would do it. So at the moment, physically, what happens
is people are safely taken out of the dinghies onto the border force cutters.
That's right.
I've been out there in the middle of Channel.
Yeah.
I've seen it happen. Yeah. They are then taken to Dover.
And the border force cutter takes them back.
Take them to Dover. What they should do is take them to Dunkirk and Calais, which they're entitled to do under international law. Yeah. That's the key difference.
Yeah, exactly.
I think what I find most distressing about that conversation, actually, is when we're talking about what to do here, nationally, domestically, and Richard Graham's response is to talk about the Red Sea and to talk about the Houthis and to talk about... And I know that's important. We've got to keep the trade going. We've seen the inflation go up this morning. But it's that kind of detachment from those in power at the moment and the people who live in this country. I've never seen such a big gap between what's important to people.
We've got to talk about something else. Richard, it's been always interesting to talk to you. Richard Tice. Never a dull moment with Richard Tice, is there?